Over the weekend, a lot of questions came up about share buybacks.
Yeah.
People were asking specifically about Berkshire. Why don't you buy back more shares of Berkshire, especially when you have $110 billion in cash on hand? What's your answer to that?
Well, we will only buy Berkshire if we think that the shareholder the next day is, or that same day, is wealthier after we've bought the stock. In other words, we bought it for a shade less, or maybe a lot less, but at least a shade less than it's actually worth. And we don't set out to buy any given amount. We set out to buy stock at prices below intrinsic value per share. Now, intrinsic value per share is not something that is precise to the penny or anything. It's probably a band of 10% or something like that. And my partner, Charlie Munger, if you asked us to give you a slip of paper with intrinsic value per share on it, it would not be the same figure, but it'd be close. And we both would have a band or something of the sort. If you're buying it below that figure, you know, if we've each got $1 and you'll sell me, and we put it on the table and you can't reach it for a while, you say, well, I can't reach it, so I'll sell you my share for 95 cents. I'll give you 95 cents. You know, if you say $1 too, you know, so no dice. So it's not complicated. It may be beyond my ability to figure out the intrinsic value of certain kinds of businesses, but with Berkshire, I've got a reasonable idea, and I try to give the shareholders the same information that I regard as important in calculating that. Now, it can change. Presumably, you want it to change upward over time because we retain earnings and we should be building more value. But that's the equation. First of all, you have to have the cash you need to run the business. I mean, Steve Jobs called me one time. I mean, he called me, I don't know how many years ago, but he was thinking about repurchasing shares. And I said, Steve, there's just two questions. I said, you know, A, you have all the money that you need to develop the kind of business that you've got in your head for the next 5 or 10 years. And, he says, we got plenty of money. And then I said, then the second question is your stock selling for less than it's worth? And he said, it's selling for a lot less than it's worth. And I said, well, you've answered your own question. But if he'd answered, we need the money we've got here actually to fully develop our business, and we've got opportunities to do it, I'd say forget about it. You know, build the new plants and do that, and maybe the cash will come in later where you can buy in stock. And secondly, if he said the stock isn't really cheap, what's the reason for buying it in?
Did he buy back shares after that?
He didn't like buying back shares. I think he was hoping I was going to give him a different answer. He didn't argue with the logic of it, but I think maybe I think he was hoping for a different answer.
It's interesting that you say that because Tim Cook, the current CEO of Apple, was here this weekend, and we got the chance to ask him about share buybacks, too, because share buybacks have been such a big deal for Apple. They've deployed so much cash doing that, and just announced last week at the earnings that they'd be buying back an additional $75 billion worth of Apple shares, or at least they've authorized the repurchase of that much. Again, we sat down with Tim Cook this weekend, and here's what he had to say about that, too. Listen in, Warren.
This is a funny story a bit. Is back in 2012, I'd been in the CEO spot maybe a year or so. We had a growing amount of cash. I think we had crossed the 100 billion kind of mark, if my memory is correct. And I was getting lots of input from a lot of different people, as you can guess. And when I don't have experience in something, I always make a list of the people that I think are the smartest people that I can contact to talk to them and get advice. And Warren was on the top of the list. As you can imagine, I'd never met Warren before. And so I get his number, I call out to Omaha, and I'm thinking, I wasn't sure he'd take the call. You know, I'm sort of calling out of the blue. He doesn't know me from Adam. And but he took the call. And I had a great conversation with him, and that was the first time that I'd met Warren, and he was very clear to me. I still remember he goes, let me just cut through it. If you believe your stock is undervalued, you should buy your stock. And I thought that was just the simplest way of looking at it. So here's what we do, is we first and foremost take care of our people, and we take care of the company and the future of the company. And we've been investing a ton in both this country and some others. We're going to spend $350 billion in the United States in building new sites, and we just announced a new expansion in Austin and so forth. So all of that is number one, right? And then if we have money left over, we look to see what else we do.
Part of what else they do, he said, is to make acquisitions. And what I didn't realize is he said they're making an acquisition every week or two.
Yeah, they make a lot of small acquisitions.
He said they've made 20 to 30 acquisitions over the last 6 months, small acquisitions that they don't really talk about and don't tell people things about.
Yeah.
You knew that?
If you look at the 10Q, and you can see it, but they make a lot of acquisitions. Yeah. And I hope Berkshire makes a lot of acquisitions. And I'd rather buy an attractive business than buy our own stock at its intrinsic business value. If our stock gets well below that, I've still got this strong, and I can do both, fortunately. But why? How an executive can say we're going to spend $10 billion buying stock and then not pay any attention to the price at which they buy it? They wouldn't buy any other business that way. And so we're price sensitive on it. On the other hand, when the price is right, there's no easier way to make money for your shareholders.
You say you like Apple buying back shares, so you think the price is right there.
Well, they've done a terrific job of it. They've done a terrific job. They've made their shareholders a lot wealthier because Tim has done that aggressively when the price was right.
How do you know in hindsight? How can you tell when a company's doing a bad job repurchasing? You have to be able to figure out how to value the business properly. It's easier than you're making it sound.
Yeah. The truth is, if you look back, and I was director of the company, but Coca-Cola kept repurchasing their shares at a time when it didn't make sense. If you look at it in the years earlier, they had a terrifically good idea of repurchasing when the company only had a market value of in less than 10 billion, and they bought a lot of stock and they were aggressive about it. But they fell in love with the idea, and I was a director at the time, but they're one of many. I mean, the same thing happened at Gillette to a degree. It's interesting. Sometimes it's difficult for CEOs to be objective about their own stock price, and they think the higher it sells, the better. And it's a fine way to feel, except if you're repurchasing it and you repurchase it at prices up to the sky.
When Coca-Cola was buying back shares and it turned out it was at too high of a price and you were a director, did you know that at the time?
I had a pretty good idea.
Why didn't you say something?
Well, I may have made some comments, but the management had done a sensational job. I mean, that's one of the reasons it got so high. They've done a terrific job. They made me a ton of money. If you belch too often at the dinner table, you don't get invited to parties anymore.
Which is the difficulty, I think, with probably any board.
You don't get to be a director if you're, unless maybe you're an activist or something, but people don't like it if you speak. And some CEOs like it a whole lot less than others. Some CEOs actually encourage a fair amount of dialogue, and others, make sure that all the important stuff comes up at 5 of 12 when you have to leave at 12 to catch your plane. And the next plane is 6 hours later.
That's interesting.
Boards are managed in different ways.
Have you known every board you've been on which has been managed well and which has not?
Well, some are managed well in some respects, and they can be dumb financially. I mean, you have some managements that really have a money sense, and then you've got others that they're very good managers, but they're not good at. I always love it when I hear a management, and I ask the guy what he's doing with his own money, and he says, "Oh, I couldn't possibly, evaluate stocks and everything. I turn that over to somebody else," and then he goes out and makes it. $5 billion acquisition is something he doesn't really know anything about. We're just buying a whole lot of stock. Some are good at it, some aren't. That's true of our managers. We have terrific managers. Some of them are good at bolt-on acquisitions, and some of them would be terrible.
Do you let the ones who would be terrible at it go ahead and make a bolt-on acquisitions?
Not very often. Some of them don't have. They have great operational sense. They don't have a money sense exactly. A lot of you talk to a lot of managers, CEOs, and they don't want to run their own stock portfolio. Well, those are decisions, and those are capital allocation decisions, and they know a lot about businesses, and they know how to value things. You'd think they'd be good investors, but I had one fellow who was a big partner, and back when I was running a partnership a long time ago, and he had stock options in his places, and he would regularly exercise and take the money and buy Berkshire. Well, he actually wasn't so dumb, but it wasn't exactly what the options were supposed to incent.
But that's unique to have somebody who understands both operations and the money side of things.
Some really do, and
I'm thinking.
I would say Tim Cook, for example, does. He has a real grasp of. I mean, he has a operational mind, and he has a money mind as well.
What about Greg Abel and Ajit Jain?
I don't want to get going through the alphabet on this.
No, I ask it because Berkshire's in a unique position, and you have people who are doing all kinds of things. Some who are managing money, some who are managing operations.
Yeah.
Can somebody do all of it?
Both of those guys happen to have extreme money sides, but I don't want to get started going through the list.
Understood. Can't help but try.
Yeah, well, you got the answer for the two important ones.